Moshi.
Hello.
I'm Deb Ramsbotham.
And I'm Annie Ramsbotham.
And we're the Rambling Ramsbothams.
Our journey might be rambling, but we hope this podcast isn't.
This week we've done a lot of rambling.
In the car.
Yeah, in like a literal travel sense.
Yeah, right now we're in a hotel in Mutsu in Aomori Prefecture, which is the northernmost prefecture on the main island of Honshu in Japan. So the only thing farther north is Hokkaido. And we've been here for a few days. We'll talk about that. But yeah, we just started the road trip, I guess, since we talked to you last. There's so much to tell you about. We have only been on this road trip for like 5 days. I think we've been through 5 prefectures already. But this episode we'll talk about hiking Hakusan, camping in Akita Prefecture, visiting the gates of hell today in Aomori, among other random things.
Yeah. So we can start with, last episode we talked about moving out of our apartment, and we did that. So the morning of the 29th, we completed kind of the final checkout inspection thing with the apartment company. And then that day we drove to Kanazawa, spent the night just in a hotel to kind of not be too crazy on like the move out day.
That's where we recorded the last podcast.
Yes, we recorded the last podcast. And then the next morning we woke up. Annie went and had her coffee. Kind of, I guess you'll see him again, your friend, so we can't call it like a farewell.
It wasn't a farewell. I'm seeing him again. But yeah, one of the last
coffee with your friends. And then we immediately, that day, kind of officially began the road trip and drove down to Hakusan.
Yeah, and this is in Ishikawa Prefecture, so the very first day of the road trip, we didn't actually leave our prefecture, but Hakusan is like an hour south.
It's 2 hours from Uchinada.
So it's pretty into the mountains.
Yeah.
But there's a mountain range over there, and Hakusan Mountain itself is one of the 3 holy mountains in Japan, which is pretty cool. So this is for Shintoism. Later we'll talk about 3 holy places for Buddhism. But this, along with Mount Fuji, which everybody's heard of, and then Tateyama, which is in Toyama Prefecture, which is just next to us in Ishikawa. So it had been on our bucket list for a while. Also, it helped that we could see it from our apartment window, which was really cool. So It was something I'd always wanted to go see what that was like.
Yeah, basically since we moved to Ishikawa and we like heard about the mountain, we've wanted to visit, but we kind of missed it the first year because it became winter and you like can't really go up there in the wintertime. And then
it's too much snow.
Yeah, then that first summer we were like pretty busy with like traveling and everything. And then the next thing we knew was winter again. So we kind of like put it off a little bit. And then so we needed to go take care of it before we left the prefecture.
Take care of it. Well, I mean, it wasn't like a, let's check this off the list, but it was something that I was excited about. And Hakusan means white mountain. Haku, the kanji for white. And it's mostly, I think, because there's so much snow up there. It's often, like most of the year, it looks white. And even, so we hiked it on July 30th, and there was still snow up there. And so I don't know if there's just always snow year-round, but it still hadn't melted all the way in midsummer, which was crazy. But that night that we arrived, it actually started to pour it was raining, kind of misty all day, on and off.
I think it was raining kind of hard all day. Especially, remember when we were leaving the grocery store, and we were in Uchinada, or like Kanazawa?
Yeah, so that was not a good sign, but, I was like, well, we have a couple hours until we get to the base of the mountain where we're going to camp, and it's not supposed to rain, so we'll just see how the forecast goes. But it started raining harder and harder as we got closer to the mountain, and we pulled up to the parking lot, and we have a tent that's in good shape, but it's hard to set up a tent in the pouring rain, and it's even harder when the ground is saturated, so not only, like, we would be, I guess, theoretically dry inside under the rainfly, but the ground was soaked, so anything we put on the tent would be wet. So I almost just wanted to leave that night.
Yeah, Annie wasn't feeling so good about our mountain climbing adventure.
Yeah, it seemed like such a bad omen. But what we did instead is we kind of like delayed back and forth. We were going to set up the tent before it got dark at 7, and the rain was supposed to stop at 7, but it didn't. And so we were stuck with like, well, it's now dark and raining, so either we leave or we figure it out. And no one else was camping because the conditions were bad, I assume. There were several people in their cars, kind of obviously sleeping in their cars. And we would have done that if we didn't have, like, the entire contents of our apartment inside our car.
Yeah, which also made it more difficult to camp because we didn't really pack it thinking about, like, setting up a tent in the rain. So our stuff was kind of scattered. So it was like we had to have the back of the car open to, like, pull a bunch of stuff out.
In the rain.
Yeah, it was just a little chaotic.
Yeah.
But we got it figured out, and we ended up spending the night. And basically there was, like, a little shelter, and we put the tent together underneath the shelter, and then there was, like, a little corner that we could kind of stuff the tent in
it, like,
underneath
barely
the shelter.
Fit. And the shelter has like sinks. It's supposed to be where you wash dishes, and there's a little grill area.
Yeah, it's like a kitchen.
It's a common space, so you're not supposed to camp there, and I wouldn't have done that if there were other campers using the area, because it would have been kind of a public nuisance to just be, like, sleeping in the public area. But, again, because no one was there, and it was, at this point, dark, so no one else was going to arrive. The only bummer is that because it's a public area, it had motion sensor lights, and so they turned on, and then as we were going to sleep, we were like, well, I guess they'll turn off at some point. They never turned off.
One of them turned off. But then the other, for whatever reason, it just stayed on.
All night.
So I kept, like, waking up in the middle of the night, and I would think, like, oh, man, like, we overslept. It's already morning. The sun's up.
Yeah.
And then I realized, like, no, it's just that stupid light is still on.
But in the morning, the rain had passed, and so that was good. It actually was probably for the best, because it would have been a real bummer to hike in the rain. And so we were greeted with a sunny morning, and we woke up at 3:45 in the morning, because we wanted to make sure we had plenty of time to do the hike and to get on the road, because we had to drive to Niigata Prefecture that evening. But we, I guess, took the tent down and got everything ready, ate some, like, English muffins with peanut butter on them on the drive up to the trailhead.
And, like, as we were leaving our, like, little camp area and heading to get the car, there were already people driving to the summit. Like, people that had slept in their cars were, like, waking up and driving to the summit.
Yeah, things were, like, busy at 4 a.m.
Yeah, and I will say real quick, if you're wondering if there was a shelter and we were sleeping underneath the shelter, why did we pitch our tent underneath a shelter and then sleep in our tent? It's because, and I forgot about this, in the summertime in Japan, especially in, like, more rural areas, there's so many bugs. Mm-hmm. So essentially we had to use our tent just as, like, a bug net, because there were so many, like, gnats and biting flies and mosquitoes. So that's, like, kind of good to know. If you're coming to Japan in the summertime and you're going to do some hiking, just be, like, a little prepared to be dealing with all kinds of biting insects.
Yeah, it's not bad, but, like, sometimes in North Carolina, I'll sleep in my hammock just under a tarp, and I would never do that in Japan because there would be too many bugs.
Yeah.
But,
so we got everything packed up in the car, and then we drove up the mountain and then started our hike. I think we started at, like, right at 5 a.m.
Right at 5 a.m. You do have to register before you hike, but it's really easy. We thought that you would have to register online, and that's an option, but it's very difficult because the form online is outdated.
And it's only in Japanese.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, it's in Japan, but it's difficult because then you get into, like, the half-width characters and stuff. But instead, they had physical paper copies at the site, and that was super easy, so we just filled that out.
And they had those in English if you need it. And so it was way more convenient to register at the site. And you can do it at Ichinose, which is the campground at the bottom, or you can do it, like, up at the main trailheads at Bodaiji, which is, like, the visitor center at the top. Yeah.
And Bodaiji is where we started our hike. I think it's the most popular place to start. So it was an estimated 6 or 8 hour, I think 8 hour round trip was the estimate.
Yeah, I think that they said it was going to be something like 5 hours up and 2.5 down or something. So it was close to, like, 7 hours.
Yeah, it ended up taking us almost equal time to come down. But so I guess I don't know where to start with how the hike went, but it was pretty relentlessly up the whole time. Like, there was no break in... We're not hikers, so maybe that's just what summiting a mountain is, but...
I don't know, we went hiking, like, in North Carolina and stuff, you know?
Yeah, but we didn't do, like, mountain summits.
Yeah, that's true. This definitely was... I was kind of... I like hiking and walking when there's... You know, maybe you go up a little bit, and then it's, like, flat, and then you go down, and maybe it's up again. But, yeah, this really was, like, straight up, straight down.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I knew it would be mostly up because we're going to the top of something, but I thought that maybe there would be, like, a more relaxed gradient as you kind of, like, go around the topography. But there was none of that. It was, like, we're going straight up. Yeah. So it was 10 miles total that we did, and it was 5,000 feet of elevation in total. But we brought water with us. We didn't have to bring that much water because there were 3, maybe more spots on the way up to refill water, and there were flush toilets 3 times on the walk up. And I think that they used water from the snow melt that was coming down, which is like part of why the mountain is so holy, is because it provides this really high quality fresh water for pretty much the whole Hokuriku area. I mean, the snow that melts there goes to the ocean. So, eventually.
I'd say, like, probably mostly Ishikawa. But,
I guess. But it's... Yeah, so there's a lot of water, and so they were piping that in, not only to, like, you could drink the spring water, but then you could also have flush toilets all the way up, which was pretty nice.
But it was funny because you would be on the trail, and all of a sudden there would be, like, a manhole cover. You were kind of, like, in the middle of nowhere. And pretty clearly, like, there was a pipe, and they had just made, I guess, the trail and the water system at the same time. So as you were hiking, you would see, like, manhole covers. Or maybe, like, in the woods, you would hear this, like, spurting sound because there'd be, like, a pipe running through the woods.
There are also shelters along the way, but you have to reserve a spot ahead of time, like, a pretty far in advance ahead of time, to get a spot that's mid-hike up. And then at the not at the summit, but close to the top, there's a lodge, and that was actually a really cool part of the hike. So that was probably like 3/4 of the way up, you reached the lodge, and honestly we thought about just stopping there because it was so cloudy. We were like, well, maybe there's no point in reaching the summit because we already can't see anything, and it's been a pretty hike so far. Through the, like, gorge was really beautiful. But we got up to the lodge and we were gonna have a little snack break. There's a post office up there, which is crazy. We saw a guy who was delivering the mail. He took the mail that morning and was getting started walking it down. And then when we had descended, we saw him returning back up with his little, like, post box on his back. It was really cool. But there's a shrine there at the lodge, and you can spend the night at the lodge. And that's more of, like, a hotel experience because, I mean, I don't know about hotel, if hotel's the right word, but
giant hostel.
Yeah,
like kind of like you're sleeping in, like, a bunk room and there are other people, because I think it can sleep something like 200 people. But
they also provide, like, cafeteria style food, so in that way it's more than just a bunk. There's like accommodations and nice things there.
Yeah, but we got there, and then we did decide to, like, go at least look at a lake, because then we looked at the map and we're like, well, there's a really pretty lake that's not too far away. Yeah. So we made a hike to the lake, and
Couldn't see the lake.
Well, I mean, you could see part of it, and it was, like, pretty, and we did get to see the snow. And then at that point, we were, like, looking at the map, and it was like, well, really, like,
we're not that far from the summit.
Yeah, we're, like, kind of, like, halfway around this loop. So if we just keep going, maybe it'll be an extra, like, 20 to 40 minutes. And we can see the summit and then go back to the lodge. So that's what we did.
The climate of the area changed so dramatically between the base of the mountain and the summit, but especially from the lodge to the summit, just in that last little bit, because I was glad that I'd wore long pants and brought a rain jacket and everything, but I needed, like, a thermal layer at the top. And this is almost August. I was shocked because when we started, it was tropical jungle. Like, I was sweating through my pants, and I was like, okay, well, it's a good thing I brought long pants for the bugs, but, like, I'm just gonna be, like, swimming in sweat at the top. And then at the top, I was like, I should have brought a long sleeve like, base layer. And we were in a cloud at that point, I guess, and the wind was so strong. So it was really dramatic. We actually lost the trail a little bit at the very top because nobody else, I mean, you couldn't see very far ahead of you, but there was not a very clear trail because there was also no foliage or anything.
Yeah,
so it was just rocky.
I would say in our defense here, it was very clear that so many people had gone off trail to make this like shortcut, because then when we got to the top, there were very clear like red X's like spray painted on the rocks at the top where they were like, please stop going here.
Yeah, if you had come the other way.
Yeah, so it was kind of like we ended up following like a path that other people had made, which was not the path you were supposed to follow.
Yeah, but it was a little spooky because I was like, oh, I really like it's easy to get lost when you're in a cloud and there's so much wind and like, I don't know, mist and stuff.
And the ground's so barren. It was definitely like a lunar landscape type thing. There were like no trees or bushes, so yeah, the path was a little bit harder to see. But we made it.
Yeah.
Made it to the summit.
And then there was a shrine up there.
Yeah, there was a shrine there, so I got an omakuji while we were there.
Yeah, which is a fortune.
Little fortune. I think it was like a middle of the road fortune.
It was small fortune, like small good luck, which is honestly the best one you can get because you don't want to get a bad fortune ever, of course, but you don't want to get the best, you don't want to get big fortune because then the only thing to go from there is down.
No, you could get another big fortune. Double up. Double or nothing.
I guess so. But it was good that you got a good fortune up there.
Yeah, especially because the walk down was treacherous.
Yeah, it was rough. My knees, actually my ankles hurt the most. And for the first time I wish that I had those trekking poles. They've always
you really sound like an old lady out there.
Yeah, I really felt like an old lady.
You kept seeing grandmas and you were so envious of their
I really
attire.
was. Because my quads were just like dying because you have to like balance, I guess, if you don't have the trekking poles. But
yeah, the descent, honestly, it wasn't like technical. It was just physically hard because you're just
descending all these stairs.
Yeah,
basically.
constantly stepping down. So, but we made it to the bottom and we were able to hop in our car and then drive straight to Niigata.
Yeah, we made it down probably at 2 p.m., which is a pretty big day after starting at 5 a.m. But we stopped a lot and took a lot of pictures and everything.
Yeah, we had a bunch of snack breaks, drank a bunch of water, sat around.
Hung out at the shrines.
Went to the post office.
Yeah, one of the girls that was working up at the top in the like mountain post office lives in Uchinada.
Yeah, she was like, I know exactly where that is.
Yeah, but yeah, so the drive to Niigata was not really exceptional. I mean, it was just a drive on the expressway on toll roads.
Yeah, and we've done it before. We've done most of the drive before, like up to Joetsu. So it wasn't anything really new.
It was expensive, relatively. I mean, I know that driving in Japan is expensive because of the toll roads. And I guess for context, for the past 3 like drive days, we've driven 4.5 hours, about 4.5 hours in the car. And the first day from Hakusan to Niigata Prefecture, where we were just like pulling off of the toll road to stay in a business hotel, we spent 6,000 yen in tolls, which is like $45 probably. And then the next day we spent less than $20 in tolls, so like 1,800 yen. And then the final day we spent 320 yen, which is like $1.50. Or $2.
I think some of that is due to the quality of the toll roads. So the toll roads have gotten progressively worse as we've gone north. And by that I mean, like, sometimes you'll be on the toll road and it's just one lane, which is pretty weird because then you're like kind of stuck in traffic on this road that's supposed to be an expressway. So that's been like interesting. And also for reference, a full tank of gas in our car is like 3,400 yen or about that. So
yeah, the first day was like 2 tanks of gas just in tolls.
Yeah, and also the toll price will vary depending on the type of car you're in. So we're in a K car, so we're in a small car, so we have the cheapest tolls for a car. So there's like a little bit of wiggle room in there if you're like planning a road trip in Japan to think about. But yeah, so that was good.
Yeah, we've been getting progressively more rural also. So from Niigata Prefecture, we kept driving north, and we reached the Tohoku region, which is like the northeast section of Japan, I guess, of this main island at least. Hokkaido is the most northern prefecture, but it's kind of its own thing because it's a prefecture and an island, and it's just up there in the north. Tohoku is the northernmost thing that you can drive to, like from Tokyo. And I think it starts in Akita Prefecture.
Maybe in Miyagi? Is Sendai technically in Tohoku?
Yeah, Sendai is.
Okay.
But, so yeah, we reached that the next day, and we were driving into Akita to go camping, actually. And so the first place that we stopped was Minami no Ike campground.
Like the South Pond.
Yeah. And we stayed there. Zeb found it on Google Maps, and it was free, and it was really comfortable, besides the fact that it had a million mosquitoes because it was right next to this pond.
And a lot of birds.
It did.
So many birds.
Yeah, the birds were like chattering with each other all night.
Yeah, I don't know if it's bird mating season, but they were constantly talking all night, and some of them were like screaming. Like it would sound like there was someone like in the pond.
Yeah, like
struggling.
a child or something.
Yeah,
that was only unsettling. Like one time at night, a bird like screamed right outside our tent and woke me up. But but the rest of the time, it was a really lovely campsite, and the mosquitoes weren't bad outside of like dusk and dawn times of day. So
yeah, and this is just like a quick aside for a tip. You should on Google, search for campsite, camping, and campground, or just camp. Because sometimes different campsites are attached to those different words. So sometimes if you just search for like campground, you might not really find anything. And even then, if you search for all those words, sometimes if you're just like scrolling through, you'll see a really cool campsite. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, why didn't that come up when I searched? And it's because it just for whatever reason.
Did you search in English, or did you search in katakana?
Mostly English.
Sometimes if I search, like I have to do this for coin laundromats. Like sometimes I can just search laundromat in English and Google will know what I'm looking for and will populate it. But sometimes I have to type coin laundry in katakana.
Yeah.
And then it will show me other options. But yeah. So we arrived there and set up the tent and things. And we had just been driving that day, and I was honestly still like wrecked from the hike. And so we decided maybe if we do a pretty chill flat bike ride, it'll help kind of like flush out the system in our legs to kind of like get back on track. So we did, I think, just like an hour spin, and there were two highlights of this little hour-long ride in the area.
Yeah.
So we were camping in this place that was reclaimed land. So a long time ago, apparently it was land, but then in like modern times, like in the last like, I don't know, couple thousand years.
Well, it's like the last like 10 or 20,000 years, it's been a lake.
Yeah.
And at some point they decided, well, we want it to be land again.
Yeah.
And so they
filled
drained
it back
it.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess they didn't fill it up, they drained it. But yeah, so we were camping there, and there was a replica of Mount Fuji, and they built it to be 1/1000th scale of the real Mount Fuji. But the summit of this little Mount Fuji is at sea level because the whole area is reclaimed land, so it's lower.
Level.
So we summited 1/1000th scale Mount Fuji.
Yeah, and then we also got to see the only place in Japan where the latitude and longitude lines intersect over land. So that's kind of neat. It was like I don't really know why. There was a monument, and there's a guy there. He was really loving it.
Yeah, he was taking pictures of every angle. I mean, it was cool, but it wasn't my favorite thing I've seen. Because mostly I don't understand latitude, longitude lines. Because, like, isn't any point on the globe, like, an intersection of a latitude, longitude line?
I think the whole point about this one is it was no decimals. So it was, like, perfect round numbers.
Like a perfect 90-degree angle.
I think, yeah. There weren't any decimal points, and it was, like, whole number and big deal.
That's cool. They did erect a monument there, so...
You know, I thought about this, where they built the monument. Because of, like, tectonic plates and, like, continental drift, and it's, like, a volcanic area, and the land is kind of moving.
Oh, yeah. Maybe they'll have to rebuild the monument.
Yeah, wouldn't the monument be off by now?
Maybe.
So I was
especially because
that.
it's reclaimed land. It's probably like all shifted.
Yeah. Anyway, so we went camping and avoided the bugs, and we woke up the next morning and we went for a nice little ride.
Yeah. And so my legs were feeling better, but still kind of rough. But I'm really glad that we went on that ride. We rode around Oga. So this is in Akita Prefecture. It's this tiny little, I guess it's a peninsula, but really it's just kind of a little jut out of the shore. Yeah. And Zeb made a nice little 50-mile loop around. It reminded me so much of the Noto Peninsula.
Yeah, there was even a town called Monzen. And in Noto, there's a Monzen.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there were some like funny things that were definitely reminiscent of the Noto Peninsula, but it was like a miniature version. Because of course the Noto Peninsula is huge and it takes days to ride around. And then this Oga area was much smaller, but it was cool because we did circumnavigate the quasi-national park of Oga. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah, they had the cliffside ocean views that are similar to Noto. They weren't quite as dramatic, but they were still very pretty. And for whatever reason, there were so many like demon sculptures or statues everywhere. I don't know if that was the theme of the town or something, but there were several. We took a picture underneath
big festival.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we did that early in the morning as we were leaving the campground. So once we got back to the car, we packed it up and we left Akita Prefecture and started driving north towards Aomori. We drove right through Yamagata Prefecture, so unfortunately we didn't like stop or do anything in there. But on the way to, I guess, to Mutsu, which is where we are now, we stopped in Hirosaki, which is another city in Aomori. It's a smaller city than Aomori. I don't know the scale compared to Mutsu, but the biggest claim to fame that Hirosaki has is that there's one of Japan's 12 original castles there. So I was pretty excited to see that. So we made a little detour to go see the cutest, smallest little castle.
Yeah, it's teeny tiny. It's basically like if you picture a normal tower or the normal top of a big Japanese castle, it's like just that.
Yeah.
It's like just the little like top section, and there's nothing below it. But
it's also the rooms themselves are just small. It's just a small castle. It's 3 floors, so I mean, some other castles are not that much taller, but it just seems so quaint, which I know they've built the castle to be this fortress, but it just seems so adorable.
Especially in its current setting, because it used to maybe appear more dramatic or maybe it looked a little bigger because it was on kind of this like dramatic cliffside with like rock faces built up.
Like next to a moat almost.
Yeah, but unfortunately they've had to move the castle to do some reconstruction, I guess, so it doesn't collapse. And so its current location is like just the middle of a field. And so it's just
it's not the
there.
middle of a field. It's like
a garden,
40 feet away from its original foundation. But they had to do this whole thing, like you said, to just scoot it over so they can rebuild the foundation. So you can see the original foundation right next to where the castle is currently. But yeah, it's on this temporary thing, and it's kind of like jacked up on these stilts almost.
Kind of, yeah. And then there's like an observation point right next to the castle.
That's like almost as tall as the castle.
Yeah, like you go up there and you're like looking into the second floor of the castle. And the castle's only 3 floors. But it was really
cute.
cool. Yeah, and I've like always wanted to go to Hirosaki because...
Really?
in that book, The Roads to Sada, he has like this whole section where he like talks about Hirosaki.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so I just don't know why, but I've always thought it would be appealing to go.
Was he there during cherry blossom time?
I don't know.
Because the pictures of the cherry blossoms there look incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty famous for the castle kind of being surrounded, but I guess a lot of castles are like that. Like, for instance, Kanazawa Castle is like that.
It is.
But I guess because Hirosaki is smaller and the trees are almost as big as the castle, it looks more striking.
And I think they just have so many more cherry blossoms that are right there. But so after that, we got back in the car and finished the drive through Aomori up to Mutsu, which is on this little peninsula that if you go out to the edge of it, you can see Hokkaido. which you
Yeah.
actually did that.
So this was yesterday. I did a pretty big ride, again, around another quasi-national park, mountain range conglomerate thing. And I went up to Oma, which is the northernmost point of Honshu. So now I've been to the northernmost and the southernmost points
It's
of
very
Honshu,
true.
both by bike, although
Yeah.
thankfully yesterday was much shorter. So I rode up there, and it's like an interesting little seaside town that definitely feels very remote.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some kind of like quirky monuments there. There's a giant tuna, because apparently Oma is like famous for their tuna catch. And there's something about like maybe the biggest tuna in Japan's caught there.
Interesting.
But there's this funny statue, and it almost looks like a weird Pokemon fight. Because on the left you have a giant tuna, and then on the right you have these like arms coming out of the ocean. And so there's this weird juxtaposition of these weird arms coming out of the ocean and a tuna. And it almost looks like they're fighting each other. And then in the background you can see a nice lighthouse and Hokkaido.
Yeah,
So-
across the ocean. Or across, I guess, Mutsu Bay, whatever
No,
that's
it's
called.
the ocean.
Oh, okay.
It's Suruga Strait, I think.
So I guess
Um,
on, like, your, like, to the east would be the Pacific, but that water right there is the strait, which I don't know like, at what point does that become the Pacific?
I mean, I
but
think it's ocean water.
it is
But-
ocean water, but yeah, you sent me the picture and it looks like some fists are, like, about to punch this tuna jumping out of the water.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like a weird Pokemon battle going on.
Yeah, and Zeb did this ride alone because I was pretty tired, and I was like, a chill day and the hotel seems really nice. So I just kind of rested that day, and Zeb had big boy day on the bike.
Yeah, I mean, just because thankfully, I didn't have anything else to do.
Yeah,
And
no,
it
I
was
think
fun
it's
to
good.
go up there and see it. And there was like some really pretty coastline stuff. Again, unfortunately, this time of the year, they're the biting insects.
Yeah.
And so when I would get to a climb, like I ended up riding faster kind of than I intended to, because there would be like a swarm of like flies like
Yeah.
landing on me trying to bite me.
That's so bad.
Yeah, it was pretty
This
frustrating. But other than
area
that,
would be
it was
really
okay.
cool for a motorcycle trip, I think,
It'd be
because
super cool.
the ride that you did from our hotel in downtown Mutsu here around to that point and then continuing on the loop, it was 90 miles, so it's a pretty big loop, but like it's not something that I would want to drive in the car.
No,
like,
in a
there's
car it wouldn't
nothing-
be fun.
Yeah, there's not
Unless-
enough to see really.
Maybe if you had like a convertible and the weather was super nice and
Yeah,
you could like make it fun, but definitely on a motorcycle it would be really cool.
But it is an interesting area because it does feel pretty remote out here.
Yeah, there's a town called Sai, and it's a little bit further from Oma, but I guess the coast is starting to curve back south. So Oma's the northernmost point. And then there was this little town called Sai, and I saw some high school students up there, and it was just crazy to think about like what their lives are like up there. Because there's no train, there's a bus, I think, but certainly it doesn't go up there that often. And then there's a ferry port to go to maybe Hakodate in
On
Hokkaido, but it seems more like a ferry for like
Goods.
like goods and cars and stuff. So it was just kind of fascinating, like seeing like into like a little snippet of a slice of life of this
Like rural.
super rural
life.
town.
Yeah.
It kind of smelled bad.
Oh.
Like maybe there's like a fish processing factory up there or something. It was just kind of like
Interesting.
it was really interesting.
Well, today we got to do some more exploring around Mutsu, but we stayed much closer to this downtown area. And I joined this time. And so you had this route planned where we would bike up to Osorezan, which is literally means Fear Mountain, which is a very dramatic name. But this is a mountain that you can see from downtown Mutsu. And it's on top, there's Bodaiji Temple, which was founded in 862. And it's actually one of the 3 most sacred places for Buddhism. So earlier we were talking about how Hakusan and Fuji and Tateyama are the 3 most holy mountains, and that's for Shintoism. I mean, I guess it could just be the 3 most holy mountains in general, but typically Shintoism and mountain worship are kind of connected. But for Buddhism, this is one of the three most holy temples.
But I guess Buddhism is also kind of related to mountain worship, because isn't Ontake a Buddhist thing?
I thought it was Shinto.
Maybe it is Shinto.
They're so
but
connected.
But the monks go up there and they do the waterfall training thing.
Oh, yeah. It's hard because a lot of times, because they're not exclusive religions, they can coexist. You can have a temple and a shrine right next to each other.
They like share property.
Sometimes, so.
But we actually first, just as a quick aside, the first place we went to was Kamabuse.
Yeah.
That was the first mountain that we climbed. And so we got to the top of Kamabuse and then had to descend down to Osorezan.
Mm-hmm. So. Because Osorezan has a caldera, which is a lake that is... It's a lake that is filled in the point of the volcano that erupted.
Yeah, the volcano blew up. There's a crater, and then the crater filled with water.
Yeah.
So now there's a lake.
So that's what we went to Kamabuse, and actually, so we saw a ton of monkeys on the way up.
So many monkeys.
We were climbing up into a cloud, which was a bummer, and so after we got to the top, there was no view, unfortunately, and then it started to pour rain. So it was a really cool climb. I did enjoy the climb, actually. But then, yeah, we were kind of racing to get down because I thought we had climbed up into this cloud and we just have to get back to the bottom. But the cloud kind of, like, followed us. And it was one of those, like, comical rains where the water is just coming down so hard and fast, like a sudden summer, like, downpour.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of scary to descend in, but a little bit, like, funny too.
Yeah, because the road was like a river at some points. It was like pretty like an inch or two of water.
It just happened so fast.
Yeah.
But we made it, and it did feel, so when you get to Osorezan, it does have this really dramatic feel because it's got this volcanic landscape. The smell is the first thing you notice because it's got this intense sulfuric smell, because that's what the hot spring water is very high in sulfur, and sulfur smells like eggs. And so we were biking down and I was like, what is that smell? And then I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize until we were there that it was a hot spring. I don't know why, I just didn't really like think about this. But
yeah, I could have told you. I thought so. We kind of went here because I had a coworker that suggested it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it was actually at that dinner party we talked about last episode, and when he told me about it, I looked up pictures of it, and I was like, oh, like, it's like a very, cool. It's like a lunar landscape. But I guess I failed to show you the pictures of it.
I mean, I like being surprised with things like that. So that was kind of fun to, like, show up. But it is a very, like, reverent place for a lot of people. It doesn't have to be, like, there were plenty of people on big tourist buses that were coming in to just see it because it's a cool place.
Yeah, and some of them were coming in hot. When we were leaving, there was a tourist bus, like, ripping into the parking lot because it's just this massive gravel lot, but the bus was going so fast.
Yeah.
But it is true that it's, like, a holy site, but honestly, like, 90% of Japan.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you visit a temple or a shrine, you should always treat it with respect, no matter whether it's, like, one of the top 3 or not. Just because somebody there is worshiping or is having, like, a spiritual experience. So even if you're just there to, like, take photos, you just don't want to ever, like, disturb the peace, I guess. But I guess you don't have to be worshiping, if that makes sense. So we were not there to communicate with the dead, but people go there specifically to do that. And it's been called the gateway to hell, or like it has a lot of the same attributes that Buddhist hell has.
Yeah, and there are a lot of ties to the underworld and kind of this spiritual realm.
Yeah, and a lot of the geographical elements too, like there's 8 surrounding peaks, and there's also a river, the Sanzu no Kawa. And so that's supposed to be kind of like the river Styx in, like, Greek mythology. And so the dead souls will cross that. And then the 8 peaks, I think, have something to do with lotus petals, symbolizing the lotus. And that's important for Buddhism. And
then even further, there are 108 of these, like, sulfuric lakes. And apparently there are 108 sins or 108 things that can prevent you from attaining enlightenment. And so there's like a lot of interesting association. with this region and Buddhism.
Mm-hmm. But the lake itself is this vibrant teal blue, and it's really beautiful. And there's steam coming up out of these rocks, which, like you said earlier, it is like very lunar landscape, because there's dense jungle foliage almost like on the way up to this point. But then you drop down to this caldera, and there's this bright blue lake, and then no foliage, because it's so sulfuric that it's just rock.
Yeah, like nothing can
like
grow
gravel
there.
So it was very interesting. And I didn't realize, I was looking this up later, in July, so we've just missed this, but there's the Bodaiji, the temple has this festival every July from like the 20th to the 24th, and people who are grieving loved ones can go and communicate with them through mediums, and these mediums are known as itako, and they're specifically these blind women that have trained to be itako, and they've dedicated their life to this. And it's such a specific thing that there's only like 20 of these women left in Japan, and part of that is because of like the aging population, and they're dying without new people being trained in this, so it's kind of like a lost practice, a dying practice, I guess. But yeah, it's just so interesting that it's a job specifically for blind women, and they do this extensive spiritual training, and then they're supposed to be able to commune with the dead and do these purification rituals. And so people will go to this temple during the festival so that they can, I don't know, find peace or communicate with their loved ones. Yeah. It's very interesting.
It is very nice. And this is kind of like, in this context, yes, it's a very like spiritual place, and I think a lot of people kind of attribute this kind of like heavy feeling to it. But then as we're leaving, there's this monk standing there, and as we're about to like walk out, he like comes up to us and starts like chatting. And he's like, "Oh, are you guys riding bikes?"
Well, because we were in our bike kits.
Yeah, we're in our kits, so pretty obviously, yeah, we're riding bikes. But then he like strikes up this conversation with us, and it's funny because all of a sudden he's like a monk, but then he's just like an everyday guy that is into bicycles, and he was like asking us what kind of bikes we have,
because
like,
he was like, "I like to bike too," and he was like, "Where have you been biking?" And he also told us like, "Please come back and enjoy." He was like, "Did you get a chance to get into the hot springs?" Because there's several different houses, I guess, like structures on like throughout the temple complex, and you can actually get into the sulfur water and bathe. And with your entry fee, it was like 700 yen, so $5. You get this ticket to enter the grounds, but then you can get into the baths. And he was just telling us, like, "Oh, if you didn't get a chance now, you can come back later." Like, you could drive your car up, and the ticket's good all day. So you can, like, he was like, "Please come back and, like, enjoy all the baths as much as you want." It was very friendly.
So he was this super friendly guy, but it kind of, like, broke the barrier between making you feel like this is, you know, it's supposed to be very quiet, and like you're not supposed to like be boisterous,
like a heavy area. And it does, I mean, it is a very contemplative, like serious place, but I think you're right that you don't have to go there and like walk on eggshells. Like, as long as you're respectful that it's a place that means a lot to people, it's not like you shouldn't go.
But it's kind of like anywhere you go, like don't be a jerk.
Yeah.
You don't want to be the loudest person in the room.
Yeah.
But so that was very funny, and coincidentally, I did get to experience the water.
Yeah, Zeb got actually in the bath.
Yeah, because at first I wasn't going to, but then we'd already gotten rained on, so we're already totally soaked, and so our cycling clothing is already just like wet. And so I was like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, I'm going to get in the bath and then put wet clothing back on.
It does sound hard, though. Putting a wet sports bra back on is, like, impossible.
It was gross, especially bibs. Putting wet bibs back on. So it wasn't ideal, but it was a cool experience to, like, get in the bath. And I'm glad that I did it. But it was funny because you really are, more than anywhere else that I've ever been to and been in an onsen, you're on display. Yeah. Because literally, in the men's, the windows were just open. Yeah. And so people would like cruise by and they would like stick their heads in to like, what's going on in there? And it's like, I'm in here taking a bath.
Yeah, but they weren't like looking in to be like, who's naked in here? But like, it's because the building itself is such an old structure. It's all wood, and then I don't know, it just has such a striking look because in the center of this very old wood building are these bright blue, kind of not murky, but like cloudy blue ponds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not ponds. I'm not describing it very well. Yeah. And so it's just so interesting because you slide this wooden door open and you're met with this really strong smell of cedar with the wood building because it's hot cedar wood, so it smells really good. And then this kind of, it was like a stinky egg smell, but it was almost comforting because it
wasn't bad.
Yeah, because it was like, oh, I'm about to get in this bath. So I didn't get in, but I put my hand in. There was nobody in the women's bath. Like, some women would come in and look and like take a picture and then leave. But yeah, nobody was like fully submerged in the women's bath or anything.
Yeah.
But it was really cool.
Yeah, it was a fun experience.
Yeah.
So it's really been like a whirlwind. And I'm sure we've even left some details out about like stuff we did during the drive. But it's been really nice and like a really good way to see the country. I definitely think, and we've kind of known this because we've driven a little bit, but Japan really is such a good country to experience as a road trip.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the key would be if you could rent one of those little campers.
Yeah.
Because it's so appropriate in Japan to just sleep in your car.
Yeah.
Like, people even do it at convenience stores or like
roadside
stations.
You're not supposed to do that, but yeah, people will just sleep in their car wherever.
But yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, and we just started.
I know. We still have 2 weeks left.
Hopefully it continues to be good and smooth. We do have to figure out how to get our oil changed in like 500 kilometers, but that should be fine. I hope. And tomorrow we're going to wake up and go to Aomori. So we're in Aomori Prefecture, and Aomori City is the namesake and capital of this prefecture. So we're going to go back south a little bit and go to the Nabuta Matsuri, which is the Nabuta festival, one of the biggest festivals in the country. And I'm pretty excited about it. And I won't say really much else because I guess we'll talk about that next episode. But yeah, by the time you hear this, we'll have already gone to the festival, so we'll share about that next week.
I was going to say, by the time you hear our next episode will be in Shikoku. Well, do you have a word of the week?
Yes, so my word is kinnikutsu. So I think I might be putting the emphasis in the wrong place, but it's do you want to guess what it is?
Gold meat?
Gold meat? No, it does have the meat kanji in the middle.
Oh.
But it's sore muscles.
Oh.
Kinnikutsu. And I wanted to use that word because I wanted to know how to say that because my legs are still sore from descending Hakusan.
Pull yourself out.
Yeah. I don't walk very much, apparently. What's your word?
So I have two.
Oh.
So I have Yomi no Kuni and Jigoku.
Okay. I know that Kuni is country.
It's true.
And that looks like the kanji for hot spring or something.
So Yomi no Kuni is the Shinto underworld.
Oh.
So it's kind of the country of, I guess, the underworld.
Interesting.
So Yomi no Kuni is the Shinto underworld, and then Jigoku is Buddhist hell.
Oh.
Or Japanese Buddhist hell. So there are, because I was trying to look up the word for underworld, and I guess it makes sense that they have distinct underworlds, because there's the Shinto underworld, which is a little more chill and kind of a little more peaceful. Like, the Shinto underworld seems kind of happy. Not like happy, but like...
Like purgatory?
Yeah, kind of like more normal. And then I think Buddhist hell, like Jigoku, can be more of like hell.
You're like burning.
It depends. So there are 8 different Buddhist hells.
Wow.
And each one is a Jigoku. And so, for example, Mugen Jigoku is the hell of unending suffering.
Mm.
And Dai Jonetsu Jigoku is the Great Burning Hell.
Oh no.
So
And neither sounds good.
Yeah, and Dai Kyokan Jigoku is the Hell of Great Screaming.
Oh.
Which is above Kyokan Jigoku, just the normal screaming hell.
Oh. Oh no.
So the Buddhist hells are a little more...
intense.
Yeah, a little scarier. Where Yomi no Kuni, the Shinto underworld, is kind of softer. A little bit nicer.
Just general unpleasant, but not like the great screaming.
Yeah, or the crushing, or any of the other... the burning and all of that.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for listening again to this week. Hopefully the sound quality is not too bad from this hotel room.
Yeah, and sorry just to dump a bunch of stuff on you.
About our road trip?
Yeah, because we've done a lot.
Wow.
So I feel like...
You don't feel like that every week? Like we just like talked into the microphone a whole lot about ourselves and then turned it off?
This week in particular, just because it's a real whirlwind trip.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it's interesting, and hopefully we'll have some other updates to share with you next week.
Yeah.
And if you have any questions or you just want to say hi, we'd love to hear from you at ramblingrosebottoms@gmail.com. And we'll be back next week.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.